on today's World Insight with Tian Wei. China's national legislature gets down to business. What's in the agenda this year? And what's the best strategy in coping with economic challenges? A CPPCC member weighs in.
I think an important principle is to enhance the quality of economic growth.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live on CGTN. We begin today's program with China's annual political sessions. Premier Li Keqiang has delivered the government work report to the National People's Congress. He listed measures and targets to keep the economy on an even keel and improve social well-being. He spelled out the challenges ahead and laid out how they will be dealt with. Here's a brief review.
Setting the tone for the country's development. Premier Li Keqiang set the GDP growth target for this year at between 6% and 6.5%. He looked back at what's been achieved. GDP grew by 6.6% last year, exceeding 90 trillion yuan. He admits the country faces mounting uncertainties in the international economic landscape. He called for more innovation and vowed to deepen reform in various sectors.
We deepened reforms of state capital and state-owned enterprises and made new gains in upgrading and restructuring SOEs and in improving their quality and performance. In addressing difficulties and issues encountered by the private sector, we used every feasible means to help them address problems.
In laying out future tasks, Premier Li vowed larger-scale tax cuts. The government will deepen the value-added tax reform, reducing the current rate of 16% in manufacturing and other industries to 13%, and lower the rate in transportation, construction, and other industries from 10 to 9%. He promised to further open up and foster international economic cooperation and competition.
We will open more sectors and improve the scope of opening up, continues to promote opening up based on flows of goods and factors of production, and give greater emphasis to opening up based on rules and related institutions.
Policymakers will seek to create 11 million jobs this year, and the surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas will be kept at around 5.5%. The spillover effect of interest rate hikes in the United States and uncertainties arising from trade disputes among major powers risk driving down global economic and trade growth this year. Li admits that China, as a result, will face challenges, making these targets set today all the more important.
For more on the NPC and the government work report, let's turn to our panelists. In Washington, D.C., Jeffrey Schott, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. In Hong Kong, Hong Hao, the Managing Director and Head of Research at Bocom International. Last but not least, in our Beijing studio, Zhang Gong, a professor from the University of International Business and Economics. I want to welcome the three of you, gentlemen, for being with us. This is the start of China's National People's Congress. The most important day is about the government work report. Now, from your perspective, Mr. Schott, listening to it, reading the excerpts of it in Washington, D.C., your impression?
Well, it's recognizing what is necessary, and that is to move forward with economic reform to offset the drag on the economy that has occurred over the past year or two because of international developments and because of factors in the Chinese economy. And so a call to economic reform, I think, is welcome and will be consistent with what the United States and China are trying to do in their trade negotiations.
Trade negotiation, of course, Mr. Hong, is one of those uncertainties that China has to deal with. Probably the U.S. too, for the rest of the year. We do not know when agreement will be in the making, even though there are different versions of press report. Mr. Hong, with that uncertainty hanging in the air, is China's plan really the plan?
I would say that the reform that we're trying to push forward right now at an accelerated speed, it is going to facilitate the signing of the agreement. And also, I think the market is running on very high expectation that some form of agreement between the two countries can be signed sometime this month. It remains to be seen, but I think most of us remain hopeful of a good outcome.
The Chinese Premier Li Keqiang did mention the China-U.S. trade frictions in his work report. Let's listen what he said.
Especially the China-U.S. economic and trade frictions had an adverse effect on the production and business operations of some companies and our market expectations. We handle economic and trade frictions with U.S. appropriately. We work to ensure stable employment, a stable financial sector, stable foreign trade, stable foreign investment, stable domestic investment, and stable expectations.
That's prescription by Chinese Premier. Professor Gong, now it sounds very clear. The message is about no matter what happened, we're going to make things stable, at least within our own border. But the question is, our own border is pretty much linked to the rest of the world.
Yes, of course. But even though we are having this difficulty with the United States, but I think very shortly we're going to address this issue. I think we're going to come to a conclusion to this round of negotiation in the next few weeks, I guess. But if you look at the trade statistics last year, the numbers are still very resilient, very robust. I mean, we still had a very good year from the trade perspective. Both exports and imports increased a lot. So the question is that if we can still keep that momentum, if we can still improve upon the current trade numbers, given that we're able to conclude a trade deal with the United States. Overall, the economy is gradually moving away from an exports-oriented economy. We are relying heavily on domestic consumption. So I think even facing this headwind, even though that the world economy is heading into some kind of a recession, I guess, I think we're still projecting a 6%, at least a 6% growth for next year, which is actually not bad.
According to IMF report, of course, the growth rate has been going down and is likely to head into some challenges. We do not know exactly in what form. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. It seems that the Chinese side is trying to say, okay, no matter what's happening in the rest of the world, no matter what might be some of the unnoticed challenges ahead, let's do what we know better. That is, let's reduce the taxes, let's reduce the fees, give the businesses more momentum and confidence. So how much? Chinese Premier Li Keqiang told the NPC, China would ease the tax burdens on enterprises and their social insurance contributions by almost 2 trillion yuan. That's about $298 billion US. He said these are broad and structural tax cuts that would benefit manufacturing, small businesses, meanwhile construction, transportation, all these different sectors. Now, Mr. Hong, 2 trillion. Usually we learn that amount of cash only from a stimulus package. But now this time it's about reduction of taxes and fees. Certainly a very different approach. Will this work?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a very big number. Back in 2009, we did 4 trillion yuan worth of stimulus, and the Chinese economy comes roaring back. So I think 2 trillion tax cut is sizable, but then the market has been looking for at least 1 trillion yuan in tax cut already. So I think there's only up to about 1 trillion yuan that is extra. I think point number 2 I would like to make is that during the implementation, the benefit of this tax cut could be a little difficult to achieve, because in last year, if you look at the distribution of profits among Chinese companies, it is the upstream large SOEs that is making a lot of profits, and downstream private enterprises, probably they're actually losing money, therefore they're not liable for any tax payment. So therefore, this year, even though there is a tax cut, but because these people are not paying tax before, and therefore it makes it harder for them to realize this tax benefit.
Meanwhile, Mr. Shah, as you've been researching about the Chinese economy for a long time, you know very well, whether the tax cut would work, it also goes together with whether the tax collection would be very much enforced or slightly enforced. So there's a lot of different nuances going on. So will this apparently big number tax cut together with reduction social security contribution by enterprises and companies be able to work and boost the economy? A big question mark, you think?
Well, again, I go back to what you said at the beginning of the program. It really depends on what's happening inside of China and what's happening outside. And we have had a drag in recent months because of the disruption to supply chains caused by the trade conflict, because of uncertainty of what's going to happen going forward, which has made investors more cautious about investing. So the government policy is trying to keep an even keel while growth is slowing down. But there's a need to ensure that more incentive is given to the productive elements of the economy, particularly the private enterprises that are inhibited not only by size but by the competition from other companies, other enterprises in the economy.
You bet.
And so to rein in some of the unproductive support is important.
I see. You bet the Chinese premier did mention about that, not only in a short paragraph, but rather in paragraph after paragraph after paragraph and after paragraph. So a lot of things actually are in the blueprint, but it's really about implementation. I mean, the three of you are sophisticated enough to know that very well. So, Mr. Gong, I want to ask you about that. When there are uncertainties, the policies like to fluctuate. And therefore, for the next few months to come, at least, we're going to see, supposed to at least, the benefits of the policy, tax reduction as well. But the question really is, will policies fluctuate very much as things change?
Well, I think it's going to take some time for these tax reductions to work it out.
What kind of time frame are you looking at?
I think we're talking about at least, my guess is half a year. Things, because these issues tend to percolate down and take time to take an effect. So I think overall, it's going to take some time to see the real impact. But I think it definitely will help. It helps in a sense that it makes corporate China more competitive. It helps alleviate the tax burdens for these companies, and so as to facilitate them to make more investment decisions and hiring more people. I am a little bit concerned about what's happening in the new technology industry, especially in the internet space, where we've been hearing news that these companies are laying off people. And I think this is happening, regardless of the tax rates or not. I think even if with the reduced tax rates, what's going to happen is still going to happen.
Well, you heard it in our background report. 11 million jobs are supposed to be created. That's a lot of burden, I have to say, and a lot of responsibility. Having said that, though, Mr. Hong, I want to concentrate on what Professor Gong just said, but in a different direction, because you can see the high-tech sector certainly has been blown out of proportion in terms of its popularity. And now, when not everyone is saying, I'm going to become a millionaire and billionaire even overnight, would that help actually the real ones, the really good ones, to survive and thrive? Or would that be able to discourage people, and therefore the sector would not be able to attract too many talents anymore? What do you think, Mr. Hong?
I think the high-tech industry will continue to boom. I think what we're seeing right now is some sort of a temporary step back because over-expansion in the past few years. Because money, especially the cost of money, is very, very cheap. So the tech sector has been able to finance its growth with very easy credits. So now, the economy is sort of slowing down, and also because of the trade friction between two big countries, they are hitting us next, sort of speak. But then, having said that, this year we have a very important new initiative, which is the new tech board, which is going to attract a lot of the unicorns and new technology companies get listed on this board. So in this process, a lot of wealth is going to be created, and I think the board is going to be a huge success. So as a result, I would say that what we're seeing right now is a temporary hindrance of these companies, and I think it will soon pass as the tech board get launched later on in the year.
The thing it really is, what is going to be the momentum and the way to encourage businesses to prosper? As we know, it is not about lack of money. It is about how will the businesses feel confident about investing? How will they feel confident about looking for new options and directions of business development? It's about confidence.
That's right.
Mr. Shaw, that's not only in China but also elsewhere in the world. We also know that the U.S., as a result of trade war between China and the United States, also have been suffering, at least in the stock market, from time to time. So you also have the tax reduction that has been implemented in the United States coincides with the quite rapid growth of the U.S. economy. You got a double up in a way. Has that been working? Will that work for the long term? Is there something China should look at what the U.S. is doing right now and see it as both experiences and lessons?
Well, we had a supercharged economy last year because of the tax cuts. So, and I say supercharged because it's not sustainable, and we're already seeing the impact of the tax cuts in the United States sort of wind down and the economy of the United States begin to slow down. Those tax cuts are not going to create a permanent boost to the U.S. economy. They've created a big hole in our budget. And so unless they are complemented with regulatory reforms and other policy reforms that do exactly what you said needs to be done, increase the confidence of businesses to invest in their future, that's going to it's not going to lead to sustained growth. And what we've seen in the United States is a lot of companies are sitting on their money and not investing in new productive capacity, and that's a problem that will be a problem going forward.
So it seems that there are some common challenges shared by China and the United States on that front. Mr. Hong, to you about that too. I mean, it was not long ago that China has been really in high spirit about investing overseas, about going global, about through different kinds of mechanisms and working with different partners around the world. Now, of course, that's still going on. It's going very well. But the question really is, will that still be a very strong momentum as it was earlier? Because China is such a big economy. Of course, China has its own market. It's big enough for a lot of things. But still, if China wants to be a very international economy, it has to interact and in a big way. So how does that work now?
Yeah, I think in 2009, the focus probably would be more domestic, inward-looking. But then, at the same time, we're opening the Chinese economy for foreign companies to invest and operate in China. So as a result, we will probably see a more embracive, inclusive economy for the global companies. And also, during this process, don't forget in 2018, we've seen the current account as a percentage of GDP. I think it's the first time in history that it actually hits a negative number. So what that means is that as China grows richer, people start to consume and start this saving. So during this process, you will see Chinese capital starting to export to other countries at an accelerated speed. And I think last year is probably the beginning of this process.
Professor Gong, foreign investment law, since Mr. Hong touched upon that, about China and the international. It's going to be one of the very important piece of legislation. Its draft is going to be studied and also judged by the National People's Congress deputies later this week, likely. So will that prevent much more momentum for foreign investors, at least, to have more confidence investing in China? Not only investing in China with one entity, but investing in China on different kind of projects.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope I think it's already happening. You know, we're seeing Tesla investing in China. Just today, you know, I read that a very large American insurance company, Chubb, is going to take additional shares in a Chinese insurance company, Huatai Insurance. So I think that's another example of foreign investment is happening here in China. I mean, this piece of legislation is going to contribute to making China's investment environment more of a level playing field. But I think this law is still at a very high level. There will be many implementation guidelines coming from relevant ministries. So I think even though we're trying to hurry this into the current National People's Congress session, but I think the details will be worked out later. Right now, I think the foreign investors who are anxious about this just have to be a little bit patient to see how these guidelines could be worked out. And they have plenty of time to contribute their suggestions, opinions about these implementation of this law.
Looking forward, actually, to that debate and discussion. It's going to be fascinating. And Mr. Schott, I have to let you in on this discussion. This is very important. You need to play a role here. That is, what about for the near future, China's interaction with the rest of the world? You got several things going on before you help us with your insights. One is the U.S.-China trade discussion, of course. We don't know the timeline, maybe soon, maybe not. Secondly, the reform of the World Trade Organization. U.S. already put forward its proposal, China not yet, but certainly some tensions already building up over there. And you are also seeing different trading partners dealing with each other in different ways. U.S. today just announced toward Turkey and toward India to scrap up the so-called favorable on these duty-free products coming from those countries. So a lot of things going on. What would that mean for China's economy?
Well, I think the most important is what Mr. Zhang and Mr. Hong have been talking about. Creating more incentives for investment in China and opening up China's access to foreign markets. On the former, in terms of the foreign investment law, it's a very good first step if it's passed by the National People's Congress, but it will require additional regulatory guidelines, as Mr. Zhang said, to ensure that there is fair competition in the marketplace. But it is a very important step forward, and particularly raising the caps on foreign equity participation in firms in China. But at the same time, there are growing headwinds against Chinese investments abroad. The United States last year passed 2 laws that are aimed at increasing the screening or restrictions on Chinese investments, particularly in high-tech industries in the United States, and on tightening the outflow of U.S. technology in investment. Europe is doing something along the lines as well. So there are some headwinds that Chinese policymakers have to address in their discussions with their trading partners.
All of these makes fascinating topics for future discussions. For now, we are running out of time, but absolutely interesting discussion, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much, the 3 of you, for joining us on this day when the National People's Congress studied the government work report. Thank you, Hong Hao, Zhang Gong, Jeffrey Schott. Really appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. What's the best strategy in coping with economic challenges? A CPPCC member, or rather an advisor to the Chinese government, weighs in right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. At the ongoing 2 sessions, China's achievements were warmly welcomed, but participants were more in tune with the nation's pressing challenges. Looking to 2019, it's necessary to sustain healthy economic development and maintain social stability. But how to do it well with the least side effects? What's the best strategy? And what can we learn from the achievements of the past years as the economic environment becomes more and more complicated? to say the least. In our special series, Way Into Sessions, I got answers from Professor Bai Chong-an, a CPPCC member who's the Dean of the School of Economics and Management from Tsinghua University. He was a former member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the People's Bank of China, China Central Bank, and also has done a lot of studies on taxation in this country. Let's listen in. What do you think, Professor Bai, are some of the principles that the Chinese economy should really look at closely?
I think an important principle is to enhance the quality of economic growth and economic development. In 2018, we have adopted some measures in that direction. I think that's something we should insist on. One direction is that we should let the market play a bigger role. A concrete example is how much government-driven investment should play in the economy. And for example, infrastructure investment in 2017, it grew at very fast pace. It grew by 19%. In 2018, the growth rate dropped. I think this was in the right direction. And we probably could have done it at a better pace. And so this is one example. The other example is that we wanted to control the risk in the financial sector. So we adopted many measures to enhance regulations, financial regulations. And again, this is in the right direction. These regulations are necessary to control the risks. But again, we probably could have done better in controlling how fast we introduce these regulations.
But there's another thing, Professor Bai, as you may know very well, the role of the state-owned enterprises and the private sector. Right. And of course, Chinese President Xi Jinping made it very clear that both fronts should be working together and advancing together. Right. But Professor Bai, what can we learn from 2018?
I think President Xi, when he met with private entrepreneurs, what he said was great encouragement to private entrepreneurs. That is, private sector is a very important part of the Chinese economy, and the private sector made important contributions to China's development. So these are very encouraging words. And what we need to do more is to put these policy directions into practice. If they can get more equal access to land, to capital, and then they will feel that they can play a bigger role in the economy, then they are willing to make more investment. That will be a positive development in improving the quality of our economic growth.
But Professor Bai, for our international viewers, what exactly is the state of, for example, the status of these private companies in China, and how is it, in a way, fitting into China's overall system? Probably they need to have some reference to understand the debate that you are suggesting here.
State-owned enterprises play big roles in providing some of the more fundamental needs of the economy. For example, infrastructure investment. It generates a lot of social value. These social values are not completely captured by the firms which are making the investment. So their state-owned enterprises do play a bigger role. But private sector respond to market needs much more promptly. They are more responsive to market movements. So in consumer products, they play a big role. In some of the technology sectors, because these new technology do need flexibility, and private firms are more flexible in making adjustments. So they play a very big role in some of the tech sectors in China. So then their concern is that, first of all, when they try to acquire capital, it's more difficult. They also pay higher costs for capital. When they try to acquire land, it's also a bit more difficult.
And especially now, Professor Bai, that is only one of those examples as to once issues are being identified, how fast will policies follow up, and how fast will a mechanism with the right setup be able to follow up to make sure the policies will be further implemented, and not just for the short term, but also for the longer term.
Right. In the longer term, I think we need to really recognize how important private sector is in the very long run development of China, and they will keep playing a role, probably a bigger role in the future. So this kind of role should be well recognized by the whole society. And private entrepreneurs worry that some people don't view them with a positive light, and so they are concerned that these views may become dominant, then they get into trouble. So we need to form a consensus in the society that private sector play positive roles.
According to the latest government work report delivered by Chinese Premier Li Keqiang today, China plans to adopt a market incentive mechanism instead of economic stimulus policies to encourage the growth of the economy. Tax cuts are one way to grow industry and commerce, as mentioned in the government work report. As a former member of the Monetary Policy Committee of People's Bank of China, who had long done studies on taxation, Professor Bai Chong'en shared his thoughts about this development. Professor Bai, you've been doing research about China's tax system for decades. Tell us what exactly is the key issue here if we're going to see a fair system.
If you compare the burden of different types of tax and fees faced by Chinese firms with their international counterparts, the heaviest burden is that of the Social Security contributions. And we did some, a lot of people have done comparisons, and this is, from the numbers, it's very clear. Social Security contributions, especially pension contributions, are very heavy burden on enterprises and on employees. And one of the reasons is that we have these legacy burdens. When we created the pension system, a lot of the retired people at that time started to benefit from the system without contributing earlier. So that was a legacy burden. And this kind of legacy burden shouldn't be borne by future generations in the sense that they pay higher fees. That creates higher burden on enterprises, on individuals. We can find other ways. For example, one very important feature of the Chinese economy is that our government owns a lot of assets. One study finds that 27% of the assets of the whole society is held by the government. This is very different from other countries. We can better use these assets. For example, we can use these assets to solve the legacy burden of the pension system, so that the burden is not borne by current contributors to the system. If we do that, we can have a more moderate levy.
And of course, China, over the past 40 years of reform and opening up, Professor Bai, has become such a strong nation when it comes to national GDP. Therefore, China also shares its outcome with the rest of the world. But of course, there's also internal debate as to how much China should contribute to the growth of the others, and of course, as a result, to benefit itself as well. So how do you see this country weigh the two different sides and balance it? On the one hand, the national wealth, partly contributed to it by tax system. On the other hand, China's contribution to the development worldwide, which of course itself is an important member of it. Right. So how do you see China weighs these two different sides of the issue?
China emphasizes mutual benefits. Everybody should benefit from trade, from investment, etc. There are areas which was necessary in China when we started economic development in the late 70s. As the economy grows, we need to adapt to the new environment. So
give me some examples.
For example, subsidies. Some of the subsidies were probably necessary before when the market system was very rudimentary. But as the market system improves, the market can play a bigger role in allocating resources. Then government allocation of resources can be cut down a little bit. And this is not only good for China itself, for our economy itself. It reduces distortions in the economy. It also mitigates some of the concerns that are raised by our trading partners. So this is something we can do that is that's mutually beneficial. So this is one area. On the other hand, I think our trading partners probably should also do better in their domestic policy. For example, I believe almost every country that does business with China benefits from the engagement. But how the benefits are distributed among citizens in our trading partners is a very important issue.
If you look at the year 2019, it's going to be a big year in a way.
Right.
You see a lot of things going on at the same time. China-U.S. trade negotiations, which might set an example as to how the biggest economies in the world are going to deal with one another.
Right.
And for the others as well to follow.
Right.
Secondly, you got the reform of the World Trade Organization. That is the trade body that the rest of the world has been enjoying growth as a result of.
Right.
Meanwhile, you also see China's own structural reform of its own economy. So you got three things going on all at the same time, not to mention other elements in geopolitics. So Professor, I know you are giving advice to the government. You are a CPPCC member. What do you think are the most important things and principles held in mind for this very challenging year?
I would think there are two areas that are really important. One, domestically, we really need to continuously improving the quality of our economic growth, of our economic development, and no matter what happens in the international arena, if we have better quality of growth domestically, we stand a better chance of dealing with these shocks. And I think the direction is clear. That is, let the market play a decisive role in allocating resources. So that's agreed by a lot of people. It's also a very important part of the government policy goal, and that's domestically. And I think in the international arena, a key issue is how the world should respond to China's growth, and how China should play a proper role in the world when our size grows, when we become a significant player, when our actions have impacts on other people. I think China needs to adapt to its enhancing role in the world. The world also needs to adapt to this. And I still firmly believe that China's growth creates a lot of opportunities for the rest of the world, and China's growth can benefit not only China, but other countries as well.
Is there a risk of decoupling?
If the world doesn't handle this well, if the world focus too much on the possible negative impact on the shock of the Chinese growth to the rest of the world, but ignoring the positive impact, then we are, yeah, that would be very sad. But I think the whole world need to work together to find a way so that we can peacefully develop together.
Our exclusive interview with Professor Bai Chongwen, a well-known Chinese economist. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.